Thank you for coming and listening today. Today we have quite the show. I have as a guest someone I deeply admire for his work, Ahmet, I think I'm saying it correctly, Yayla. Asking a few seconds because he's in the room waiting. He has a Ph.D. and he is the guy who is he's one of the professors at George Mason University. He's currently working as the Deputy Director of the International Center for the Study of Violent Extremism, also known as ICSVE. He formerly served as a professor and the chair of the Sociology Department at Harran University in Turkey. Dr. Yayla's earned both his master's and Ph.D. degrees in criminal justice and information science from the University of North Texas. Dr. Yayla served as the chief of counter-terrorism and operations division for the Turkish National Police. Dr. Yayla's research mainly focuses on terrorism, radicalization, and countering violent extremism. He has authored and co-authored several articles and books on the subjects of terrorism and violence, including First Responders' Guide to Professionally Interacting with Muslim Communities. Let me tell you, this man's work regarding ISIS is hard to compare to. I have been reading a lot of materials over the years, and to date, I have not seen anyone write as specific information as Dr. Yayla, and I'm going to bring him right on. Hello, Doctor. Is it Yayla? Is that the correct pronunciation of your name?
Thank you very much, my friend. It is Yayla.
Yayla. I wanted to get that correct, and every time I listened to someone introduce you, it was I, and I was thinking they're missing that Y, but I wasn't sure. Yayla. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you for your research because I read your work in several different places. I have a couple articles that I've read, and the perspectives on terrorism I've been reading since you started writing for them. So I have to say your work is unique. Part of it, I think, has to do with your work in Turkey, because I don't think anybody has had the opportunities you had. I didn't mention, I believe it's a book now, the interviews with the ISIS detainees. Is that a book now, or?
Yes, it's a book now. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was. I've got to pick that one up myself. Like I said, this man has done some amazing work. He was the head of counterterrorism in Turkey. Now, I can imagine that as a responsibility. So I want to tell people where they should find this article. Please take your time. I did provide a link in the room, I believe, to the Washington Times article. It's called "Erdogan Has Command Responsibility for Aiding Terrorism." Now, as I'm saying this, I caught another article this week after I'd asked you to come on, and I did not realize your family was facing persecution because you did stand up.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little about that?
Okay. When I started to work as professor and chair of Sociology Department in Harran University, it was the beginning of 2014, and I decided, based on my education here in the United States and my profession as the chief of counterterrorism in Turkey for 20 years, the best academic research would be on ISIS, as they were just recently establishing themselves and announcing their caliphate. And I thought how I could reach to those guys and learn that terrorist organization from the members of the terrorist organization, because everybody was saying something, but people were speculating mostly. Nobody knew exactly what was going on inside this terrorist organization. And based on my experience, I decided to reach to the defectors of this terrorist organization so that I could get honest answers to my questions. I spent around 3 to 4 months to reach to the defectors hiding in Turkey and in Şanlıurfa, where my university was. Şanlıurfa is a big city on the Turkish-Syrian border with a population of 2 million people and around 400,000 Syrian refugees right now. In addition to that, 2 million people live in Şanlıurfa. After 4 months, finally I reached to some defectors through some smugglers who helped them to come into Turkey. And speaking with them for several hours, finally I gained their trust and started to interview them. And these are deep interviews, mostly 3 to 5, 6 hours with each person, detailing their lives, how they were introduced to terrorist organization, how they were recruited, what kind of training they received, and what happened inside the terrorist organization, the tactics of the ISIS, their methods, and then why they decided to defect. As I continued to interview the defectors, Dr. Ann Speckers from Georgetown University contacted me, and we partnered up and established this joint ISIS interviews project, and went on interviewing the ISIS defectors together. And we also started to video record those interviews. On our, I think it was the 12th interview, when I was picking up the defectors, a senior ISIS member in Şanlıurfa saw him and then saw me. Basically, I was caught to an ISIS member picking up one of their defectors. And from that point on, we realized that I wasn't safe anymore, because just 2 days prior to this event, ISIS killed 2 journalists in Şanlıurfa at the heart of the city. Basically, they stabbed them to death, cut their throats, took pictures of the deceased, and went back to Syria, and from Twitter, tweeted their pictures and said, if you speak against us, this is what is going to happen to you. So I decided to move to the United States. And in 2015, November, I came to the United States. And I continued to do the interviews. And when the coup happened in Turkey, World Policy Journal asked me to write an article about the coup and what happened during the coup. So based on my experience and my understanding at the time, I wrote this article titled "The Coup That Wasn't." And in my article, I argued that the coup was staged by Erdogan. He could receive the powers he had been after, but couldn't get through elections. And it's been over a year now. When I look back, I was 100% right. And right now there are trials, and we are hearing the stories of the detainees and suspects of the coup, and we can better understand exactly what happened in those days. Erdogan was so angry with my article, and also he was upset the fact that I was writing about his support to the ISIS terrorist organization and other radical jihadist terrorist organizations in Turkey, including Jabhatun Nusra, Ahrar al-Sham, and others. So after the coup happened, they arrested my son in Turkey. He was first year university student, and he was supposed to come to join us here in the United States, but we waited till he graduates from his classes. But unfortunately, he was picked up when he was leaving the country with the customs.
Is he safe here now in America today?
He is not in the United States. He is in Turkey. He is so far safe, but there is no explanation why he was picked up, why he was arrested. The only thing the government claims that he had a dollar bill in his backpack, and that dollar bill confirms that he was helping the coup makers. It's been 8 months. There is no indictment. They are just holding him basically as a hostage.
So he is still under arrest. I did not realize that. Wow, we'll end up having to do some heavy praying for your son then. I'm amazed. I do want to tell you that your article that you just mentioned, that I had shared that several times. There is a person who, when the coup happened, I was on the air with someone here who was in the area who's a Gulen specialist, and said the same thing you did. I only had a clue as to what happened because of him, but your article came out right in time, and it just endorsed everything I said, and that the person who I was talking with ran with that and shared that article with a lot of people. So I want you to know that people were pushing it, and at least from the perspective of this network, we were out there pushing that story, that it was a fake, while the general networks were explaining, news networks were going with the foolish end of the story, saying it was a coup. Could only do so much when people don't have all the information.
Yes, you're right.
I do want to get into the interview a little bit deeper, because I'm fascinated with a lot of your work. This article, again, it's entitled "Erdogan Has Command Responsibility for Aiding Terrorism." In your article last week, you make a very specific claim that Erdogan is at least partly responsible for the success of ISIS becoming the Islamic State. Could you please share some of that with our listeners?
Of course. I have been following the events and what's happening in regards to ISIS and other terrorist organizations from the beginning of the conflict in Syria. The uprising, in fact, began in 2011, and I was the chief of counter-terrorism and operations in Şanlıurfa at the Syrian border then. And Şanlıurfa is like 15 miles away from Syrian border. So we are very close with Syria, and whatever was happening inside Syria was directly affecting my city. And I make this claim based on my experience and what I have seen with the evidence at hand, which is documented by international agencies. And I openly claim that if Erdogan had not allowed Islamic State operatives inside Turkey to transport weapons and explosives to Syria and Iraq openly, or if he had not allowed over 25,000 foreign fighters to pass through Turkey without being stopped, there would be no Islamic State as we know it today. And hence, thousands of people likely would have evaded their brutality, and there wouldn't be thousands of deaths at the hands of ISIS. So from this perspective, Erdogan is directly responsible.
I found, hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, it sounded like it dropped for a second. I'm sorry. I found your statement about the hospitals, the use of hospitals, fascinating. Could you go into that a little bit deeper?
Sure, of course. When the Islamic State came out by the mid-2013, their fighters were fiercely fighting against their enemies in the region, basically at the border of Turkey. And not only the other opposition groups, but also the coalition forces also were fighting against ISIS, and they were dropping bombs. Several ISIS fighters who were wounded during those fights were brought into Turkey to the cities on the border, including Şanlıurfa, Gaziantep, Kilis, and Hatay. These are bigger cities at the border, and several of those ISIS or other terrorist organization members were treated in those hospitals. And the police were asked to provide security to those terrorists so that the others would not harm them. The Turkish state never billed or charged any money for the treatment they received in those hospitals. The senior ISIS members who were brought in, they were to private hospitals, and they received free treatment in those hospitals, and the bills were paid by the Turkish National Intelligence. Namely, Ahmet H, who was the deputy of al-Baghdadi, and he and his 8 friends were wounded by an American bombardment in Syria. They were brought into Şanlıurfa to a private hospital, and they received free treatment. And after they were discharged, the Turkish National Intelligence unfortunately paid all the bills. The similar incidents were happening in the neighboring cities. For example, Gaziantep Sanko Hospital, SANKO. It is a private hospital of a very prominent rich businessman. The owner of the hospital personally told one of my friends. He said, we receive constantly the Islamic State members here. We treat them, and the Turkish National Intelligence pays cash. I am happy with this transaction because I can charge as much as I want. Nobody is questioning. There are no records, and I get paid immediately. So this was the case for years up until maybe the beginning of 2016.
Wow. This is just amazing. I mean, this is what I said about your work is totally different. You have very, very specific information. So I have here's another question I have. You were the head of counterterrorism in Turkey. You know, I understand. When you're in charge of counterterrorism, it means there's somebody over you. I'm a teacher by trade, like yourself. You're a professor. We have people we're accountable to. So I'm just a little curious. I mean, you wrote that the Islamic State freely operated in Turkey for years without facing any counterterrorism options. So I have a couple questions. One is, what was Turkey's definition of terrorism that allowed ISIS to work freely?
Okay, it's not about definition. Turkey's definition of terrorism and the merit laws definitely defined ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, and others as terrorist organizations. However, Erdogan and his government openly ordered the governors in different cities not to prosecute the Islamic State, Jabhat al-Nusra, and Al-Qaeda. And of course, the police were not happy about it. But the story has a catch. At the end of 2013, on 17 December, the Istanbul Police Department carried out a corruption operation against Erdogan's close circles, including Erdogan's son, Bilal Erdogan, 4 ministers and their sons, and also Reza Zarrab, an Iranian-Turkish businessman. The allegations were so serious. Basically, Erdogan's close circles were deeply corrupted, and also they were using the state of Turkey's institutions to evade sanctions against Iran. In fact, the main suspect, named Reza Zarrab, was arrested in Miami by the FBI around 6 months ago, and right now he is being tried in New York Federal Court, and he is in prison, in jail in New York, arrested by the FBI. After this operation, Erdogan claimed that this is a coup by the police against his regime and his government, and he immediately fired police officers, police chiefs, prosecutors, and judges who were part of that investigation. And then he halted the investigation, shut down the investigation, freed all the suspects, and basically the case was closed. However, a similar case was opened by the FBI here in New York because American banks were facilitated by Turkish state banks, while Erdogan and his middlemen were transferring Iranian funds to purchase Iranian oil during the embargo. Basically, Erdogan used Reza Zarrab, an Iranian Turkish businessman, as a middleman to evade the sanctions against Iran during the embargo and sent funds through Turkish banks, also using some American banks to Iran, and helped Iran to go around the embargo. And after 2014, he started to fire several hundreds of police officers and chiefs who were involved in these operations. He sent an order openly to all over Turkey, basically asking the police chiefs and governors to halt any ongoing operation against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Several newly assigned police chiefs immediately halted all those operations because a counter-terrorism operation is an ongoing operation. You have to collect evidence, carry out wiretapping and surveillance operations to have solid evidence against terrorists. Without a solid background operation, you cannot be successful during the court process without collecting evidence beforehand. But Erdogan, by ordering to halt all these operations, basically allowed and asked the police not to carry out any operations. And in fact, he openly told them to stay out of their loop, not to touch ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Several newly assigned officers and police chiefs in Turkey accepted what he had ordered, and many, of course, did not accept. For example, one of the police chiefs in Van, an eastern city in Turkey, carried out an operation against Al-Qaeda, and also one of the NGOs in Turkey called IHH, which is an NGO very close to Erdogan, claiming that they were assisting Al-Qaeda and they were carrying out support to Al-Qaeda, transferring support, logistical support to Al-Qaeda from Turkey. Erdogan got mad. He immediately arrested any officer who was involved in that operation, and also the prosecutors and the judges who issued the warrants for the search and arrest. To this day, those police chiefs in Van or in Istanbul, and also the prosecutors and judges who carried out those operations, are still in prison instead of terrorists. Terrorists or corrupted family members or close circles of Erdogan are out there freely doing their business, but the police, the prosecutors and judges who try to investigate their cases are in prison, unfortunately.
You also point out, I'm going a little bit off the track here. I should go back a little bit. I did want to ask, under the last president, President Obama, there were camps in Turkey to train, there was a camp in Turkey to train Syrian rebels. I remember reading that in Der Spiegel. So I'm curious, when you talk about the training camps that are in Turkey that are allowed to operate freely, if any of those are the same camps that were used to train, the U.S. camps used to train Syrian rebels.
I think there are a few types of training centers and camps that we need to address. With the Syrian uprising, Erdogan decided to help the opposition openly. So Turkish borders were opened to anyone coming from Syria 100%. Nobody was stopped at the Turkish borders. No documentations were asked. And Syrian refugees, of course, inside them a lot of terrorists, entered Turkey without any problems. And even if they were not officially entering the country, they used backdoors, or smugglers helped them to get into the country without being stopped. So around 3 million Syrian refugees are right now in Turkey. This is the initial issue because Syrians, after the conflict, were welcomed without any hesitation, mostly for humanitarian reasons. But a lot of terrorists entered Turkey among them. The other issue, Erdogan extended his support to the Free Syrian Army openly. He sent weapons, logistical support, and also he welcomed their leadership in Turkey and provided military training and assistance to their fighters.
Is this not the same group that is really AQI, Al-Qaeda Iraq?
No. However, apart from that, what happened was the Turkish National Intelligence openly started to support different jihadi Salafist jihadi terrorist organizations in Syria and Iraq. A good example to that was Adana Highway MIT, Turkish National Intelligence truck operation. The Adana police received a tip indicating that 3 trucks were transferring weapons to Syria. And those 3 trucks were stopped with a warrant from a judge on Adana Highway. When they were stopped, officers or the people inside those trucks said those trucks belong to Turkish National Intelligence, and the police or gendarmerie, rural police like Sheriff's Department here in the United States, cannot stop those trucks because this is state business. However, the prosecutor who ordered the stop said, no, I have my warrant and probable cause to search these trucks, so I'm going to search these trucks to see what is your cargo. The intelligence officers inside the trucks said, no, you cannot search. We have medicine and aid that we are transferring to Syria, and you cannot stop us. So by force, those trucks were searched through the orders of the prosecutor on the scene. And inside the cargo, on top of the first layer, they found medicine boxes. However, underneath those medicine boxes, there were military-grade weapons, missiles, rockets, explosives, ammunition. Of course, they were all documented. However, Erdogan got really upset. He called the governor of Adana. The governor of Adana went to the scene and asked the prosecutor to release those trucks. The prosecutor demanded a written order from either Justice Minister or the Prime Minister then Erdogan. Instead of providing a written order, they threatened him, and eventually, through Erdogan's pressures, the trucks were released and they went to Syria. After that incident, the police officers, the gendarmerie officers, the prosecutor, and also the judge who signed the search warrant were fired immediately, and then they were arrested, and they are still in prison. And also, a worldwide known journalist, Can Dündar from Cumhuriyet newspaper, who made a news piece about this incident and published the pictures of the weapons and what was in those trucks, arrested with the crimes of treason, and also he was announced by the Prime Minister Erdogan as a person who betrayed his country. He served with the editor of Cumhuriyet newspaper 4 months in prison, and he was eventually released due to the pressure of international communities. Right now he lives, I think, in Europe. So not only the police officers, prosecutors or judges who were involved with this case, but any journalist who dared to make a news piece about that incident were also arrested. So you can
Wow.
understand the pressure coming from Erdogan towards the government officers or towards the media about not intervening his operations in regards to different terrorist organizations.
Wow. Out of all the critics of Erdogan, you're the only one I have really found that gives specific reasoning. And just like we just heard, one of the things I found really fascinating, because here in America we had a problem where our president would not show his birth certificate. Then he showed something that was made on Photoshop. So you've made a public statement about Erdogan not showing something. What is required in Turkey that he did not show?
Okay, in Turkey, to become a president, you need to be a college graduate. You need to have a 4-year college degree and provide your diploma and transcripts to the higher election committee. Erdogan, throughout his political history, never provided a diploma. He only provided a letter from a university indicating that he graduated from their university. However, in different letters he provided, there were different registration numbers, different dates, and different signatures. So clearly, he did not receive a 4-year college diploma. To this day, he cannot provide a college diploma. And when the Istanbul University was asked to intervene and solve this problem, they basically shut down the whole diploma system so that nobody could cross-check Erdogan's diploma. And the diplomas he provided to the public had different registration numbers that cannot be traced. And also, the professors who signed those diplomas did not have the titles at the time when the diploma was signed. So clearly, he provided made-up diplomas to the public. But to fix this problem, now he is passing a new constitution. He amended constitution, and this in this amendment, he halted the requirement of a college degree for the president.
Wow. You know, the funny thing here is in the United States, no one's required to see the birth certificate that you're born in this country. I mean, I really spent time looking into that to find out, well, does the election board of the United States, so do they look into the FEC, do they look into it? And the answer is no. So I spent some time figuring out who's supposed to. And it's actually your state that you're in, that you're originally running from. They're supposed to verify that you are who you claim, that you had a birth certificate. However, in this case with President Obama, no one did that. So we're having, it's kind of humorous that we're having the same problems by somehow no one vetting the person that is supposed to be in charge. That's kind of scary.
My friend, there are some differences between Turkey and the United States. Right now in Turkey, there is no rule of law. Over 4,000 judges and prosecutors were fired after the staged coup. Apart from the military and police officers, I am not counting them because thousands of them, over 10, 20, 30,000 of them were fired. And there are in Turkey 12,000 judges and prosecutors. So 1/3 of all judges and prosecutors were fired and arrested. The rest of the judges and prosecutors cannot carry out any decision or reach to a verdict without asking or before asking to the Turkish National Intelligence so that they don't upset Erdogan. Any judge who dares to flee or not to arrest a suspect that Erdogan wants is being fired immediately and also being arrested immediately. So you can see judges who arrested other judges who are getting arrested after a few days. So the rule of law means nothing. The torture came back again. The police, unfortunately, assigned by Erdogan after the coup, started to torture the suspects very badly. You can see broken arms, raped people, beaten suspects, and they are not hesitant not to show them to the public. The pictures are everywhere. Apart from that, around 50 people were killed inside the prisons, and the reports indicate that they were all suicide. And also, the Turkish National Intelligence started to kidnap suspects so that they could torture them and try to get whatever they are trying to get from them through their harsh interrogations. And if they cooperate, that's fine. Otherwise, kill them, throw them away somewhere. So these lawlessness are becoming the new normal in Turkey, and nobody can stop them. And Erdogan is using this terror against his own population so that nobody could dare to oppose him.
This sounds vaguely like the closest thing I can think of is Stalin or Hitler's usage of government.
Yes, unfortunately.
Is there any solution you see as a possible outcome?
As you mentioned, Erdogan is going after the steps of Hitler and Stalin. And Hitler was one of the masters of propaganda and controlling the media. He very wisely controlled all the media, and he had a propaganda minister. So, following his steps, Erdogan is now controlling almost all the media in Turkey, or any opposition that dares to write anything about him goes to prison. There are around 200 journalists in prison right now in Turkey. Several media outlets were confiscated, shut down, or they basically bowed to Erdogan and they started to write as Erdogan wishes. So there is no free media. And Erdogan's papers, his mouthpieces, openly pump lies about what's going on around the world. If you look at his papers, you could think of Turkey is the most strongest and richest country in the world. Everything is great. There is no terror. After each terror attack, there is a media ban, and no media can mention, write, or broadcast about any terrorist activities in Turkey. And unfortunately, several mid-class citizens and people in Turkey are not aware of the facts because they are only being fed by the Erdogan TV stations or his papers. And just like Stalin, Erdogan went after the brains of Turkey, regardless of their ideology, leftist, regular Muslims, different Islamic groups, doesn't matter. If he deemed anyone as opposition, he went after them. And so far, last week, the Justice Minister provided the numbers. They have arrested over 45,000 people who are right now in prisons in Turkey. They have detained over 113,000 people between 10 to 40 days and then released them on condition with bail most of the time. And they purged and fired over 150,000 people from their offices, including doctors, nurses, judges, military officers, police officers, or anyone who was working for the government. And all this make sure nobody dares to speak against Erdogan.
I have a chat room with this show, and I'm getting a couple questions that they'd like to hear from you, ask you. One of them is, what do you think of Fethullah Gulen?
Fethullah Gulen is an Islamist leader here in Turkey, but right now he resides in the United States. Erdogan was one of his allies, or they seem to be friends, but their ideology is almost 100% different. Erdogan is a political Islamist, an ideology which is close to Muslim Brotherhood and with elements of Salafism. Gülen is a Sufi and Sunni understanding follower. Basically, in the United States, several people know Rumi, the ancient poet Rumi. Rumi is the representative of Sufi Islam. So they are ideologically not the same. Erdogan claims Gülen was behind the coup. However, he could not provide any evidence to the United States to prove his point. So far, and during my tenure, I had not seen any direct terrorist activity from the Gülen group. So it is a hard sell for Turkey to present Gülen as a terrorist. Erdogan could convict him with a lot of things, but I think not as a terrorist, because the reports we are seeing coming out of different European countries state that Gülen group cannot be labeled as terrorists. And
okay. There's one more question close to the same lines. The question is, have you investigated or looked into the allegation that the former NSA head, Michael Flynn, was involved in a plot to kidnap Gülen with Erdogan's son?
I am not in a position to investigate that.
Okay.
The only information I have is whatever I read from the media. So I really don't know. But what I see is Erdogan has not only corrupted Turkey, but he is trying to reach to the United States and trying to corrupt the American justice system as well through different means. I can see that he's pouring billions of dollars to try to influence the case here in New York Federal Court, because he clearly knows that Reza Zarrab case is directly tied to him, and as the trial starts, most probably Reza Zarrab and the newly arrested again in New York at the JFK airport, the deputy CEO of Halk Bank, where the funds were being transferred through, they are going to basically told to the judge or during the trials that Erdogan was behind all this scheme, making Erdogan a suspect here in New York at the federal court. So he is really scared of this, and he is trying to basically buy his way out from this trial.
Wow, that's big news. I thank you for sharing this. This is it's kind of amazing when I think about, like I said, you're unique. I have not seen anybody write such detailed information. I think a lot of this is because you have firsthand experience working in Turkey, and I will probably be out there buying your book. Is in the middle of I'm going back to school also for a counter-terrorism certificate. I got myself accepted into Henley Putnam, and I'm doing a graduate certificate in intelligence analysis, and I'll be starting that next month. So I'll throw this one out there too. I have one more that I'm curious. I think you would agree with me on this one. Would you? I thought I wasn't going to let you go till I asked if there was three things that you think would help. I'm just going to say the United States, since you're here. What would be the top three things you would suggest to help us to take a stronger stand against terrorism?
Okay, based on my experience and my research that I have been carrying out for several years, I think this problem cannot be solved with only one solution or one approach. Terrorism problem is multi-faced. There are different aspects of this problem. It is right now an international problem. First of all, I would like to tell you this. Everybody, including myself, think that terrorism is directly related with ideology. And this is true. However, when it comes to recruitment, which is the most part of terrorism, because without new members, terrorist organizations cannot live. In most cases, it is not the ideology, but the close circles of the new recruits. In order to be able to fight against terrorism, we must understand the recruitment cycle of different terrorist groups and organizations. If you look at the recent attacks in Europe and study the attackers, we can clearly, in most cases, see that most of those attackers were not true believers of the Islamic State ideology. Yes, they were following partly their ideology and trying to practice, but if they were in Syria, in Raqqa, in most cases they were going to be fined and punished by the ISIS-Hizbah, ISIS morality police, because they were not applying the rules of their understanding of Islam. Research indicates that the close circles of youth, family members, friends, relatives, are the most important factors in recruitment of ones to a terrorist organization. Ideology is another big part of it, and unfortunately, today's terrorism comes from Salafist understanding of Islam, and this is directly related to Wahhabism, which is practiced in the Middle East mostly today. And while different Wahhabi institutions are trying to spread their understanding of Islam, they are unwillingly or indirectly assisting ISIS and Al-Qaeda to recruit new terrorists, because as the Grand Imam of Mecca, the Grand Mosque in Kaaba, Saudi Arabia, said around 6 months ago, the ISIS ideology and the ideology of Wahhabis that they share are exactly almost the same ideology. And because of that, when someone is being affected with Wahhabi understanding of Islam, in most cases or in some cases, they are being open to be influenced by the Al-Qaeda or ISIS recruiters. If we add the social media and social interactions and the easiness of reaching to those people through different social mediums, and we combine all these, we have these problems and huge terrorist networks today. So in order to better counter today's terrorism, I think the first is, and the most important part of the struggle is the online jihad, online terrorism. We are still very behind it. We must be able to shut down all the mediums and prevent all the communications that the terrorists are enjoying today. If we look at the recent attacks, for example, the Reyna nightclub attack in Turkey, we can clearly see that they used the social media to communicate about the attack, and after the attack to make propaganda about that attack, including pushing a video that was shot before the attack by the attacker. So the ISIS and other Salafist terrorist organizations are using the social media and the internet, the cyberspace, very cleverly and very, in a way, they spread their venom very swiftly to the societies in different parts of the world. We need new approaches to stop this spread as soon as possible. the world, the cyber companies were very successful in prevention of child porn. I think similar rules can be applied to cyber terrorism. And once we win the war over cyberspace, the terrorist organizations are going to get a lot of damage and their influence around the world will diminish. The second issue is countering their recruit, and this is mostly a local thing. So that needs to be tailored locally, case by case, and based on different terrorist organizations. It is a different approach in Europe, a different approach in the United States, and most certainly a different approach in Syria and Iraq. And I think the third thing is the justifications different terrorist organizations are using. Those justifications might be lies that they are spreading to the world, like the US is killing innocent people, which is not the case, or several different fake news, false allegations that they are spreading locally to try to win over local youth, basically using those allegations and justifications to recruit them. So we need to be able to get those justifications from the hands of terrorist recruiters. And finally, the finance and logistical support of terrorism and the terrorists they receive. We must go after their supporters. Like Erdogan, he had been supporting Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIS, and other local terrorist organizations openly. His intelligence provided weapons, arms, training to terrorist organizations. If we look at recent CAR report from European Union, we can easily see that all ISIS IEDs, explosives that ISIS uses in Syria and Iraq, their materials and the chemicals they used in those explosives were provided from Turkey. The report openly indicates that there was evidence that the Islamic State operates a major accusation network in Turkey and has a direct line of supply from Turkey through Syria to the Mosul area. So if it didn't exist, ISIS wouldn't be able to carry out those attacks, suicide attacks. All the materials came from Turkey. If we were able to stop Erdogan, we wouldn't have those attacks and there wouldn't be that many deaths. So I think a combination would help to reduce terrorism.
Wow. I'm amazed. So I've got. I'm sorry. If you got a few more minutes, I got just a couple more questions. Sure.
Please take your time.
Gary, I just want to summarize. Like we have Gary with Elemental Struggle is helping us out on the. He's summarizing what you did. I just want to do that read some of his summaries real quick, and then and I'll share what his questions are. And I think you said some important things. I believe you said the first one was shut down online mediums of terror recruitment and incitement.
Yes.
The second one was counter recruitment at the local level.
Yes.
Third one, counter lies that justify terror and propaganda or terrorist groups. And I think you gave us a fourth. We must go after the supporters of terror. The financial supporters, the persons who provide whatever that supports terror. So I think you gave us four. The other thing, now it's interesting, as you mentioned the online stuff, a question popped up. Does Turkey have free internet or is it controlled by Erdogan?
It is controlled by Erdogan. The Twitter and Facebook is purposely slowed down. If there is a major attack or a major incident, Erdogan shuts down the social media or in some cases the whole internet. And the traffic on the internet is 100% controlled. And there are even 15-year-old kids who retweeted a criticism against Erdogan got arrested because they retweeted that tweet where Erdogan was criticized. So you can understand. You can see a lot of people right now in prison because they wrote a tweet about Erdogan.
Wow. So even the online element in control. That's just an amazing thought process. What was the last question? Here it is. If you seek, just get this out. If you seek to stop terror recruitment online, is it possible in Turkey?
With this medium of Twitter, Facebook, the Telegram that the terrorists use very frequently, very often, Turkey would not be able to stop that alone. So we need a broader approach. So in terms of cyber terror, stoppage or implementations, I think we need a broader and more international effort, and a lot of maybe countries and companies coming together and making like sharp decisions, not allowing terrorists on the cyber mediums, social media to spread their propaganda.
It's quite a. Those four things seems. It's a good summary. It's a good simple way to put things. It's just it also seems like if we could. You gave us four things that should be able to be attacked, yet they all seem very, very huge. It's an amazing thing in that. Huge and simple at the same time.
Winning over ISIS in Raqqa is not going to be the complete solution. All of a sudden, we are going to have thousands of terrorists spreading everywhere in the region, blending into the societies, becoming basically regular terrorists, guerrilla-like terrorists, and attacking unknowns. So we are going to have or continue to have this problem for a long time. We must have policies focusing on a long-term solution along with short-term protective measures.
So what about Turkey's building mosques in America? Do you see that as a problem also?
I think we need to understand political Islam when we are looking at this problem. The definition of Islam and Iman, basically the belief based on the Islam the Prophet Muhammad revealed, is believing in God by one's own free will. Without a free will, you cannot become a Muslim, and that will must be without force. The Quran openly says you cannot force anyone to become Muslim. And if you look at history, yes, there were problems, but under common practice, no one was forced under just administratives to become Muslims. If you look at the Ottomans, there were Christians and Jews living side by side. But when it comes to today's political Islamist ideology, which is very close to Muslim Brotherhood or a mixture of Muslim Brotherhood and Salafist ideology that is being used by Erdogan today, using Islam for his political objectives. So if you look at Erdogan and his close circles' lives, we cannot see a real Islamic life. In fact, we can see just the opposite of what the Prophet Muhammad advised. However, by using Islam as politically as a tool, he is basically reaching out to regular people in the different segments of the society and telling them, hey, I represent you and vote for me. Let me give you an example. 2 days ago, Erdogan published a picture. And in that picture, he is teaching to read Quran to his grandchild. And normally you don't publish these kind of pictures. However, we have election this weekend in 5 days, in 4 days, and he is giving a message to people that he is one of them. He is a devout Muslim. So if you are a Muslim, you need to vote for me. When it comes to the mosque here in the United States, in Maryland, I have problems with that because under normal circumstances, states do not build prayer halls, mosques, churches. People do that by themselves, by establishing sometimes NGOs, non-profits, etc. This is a unique feature of Erdogan, that he is establishing mosques or centers in different parts of the world to increase his influence in those countries. Not only a mosque, he has several NGOs here in the United States. He is pumping with millions of dollars to purchase influence, to open dormitories, to establish research agencies, to support his ideas and his policies.
Wow. That's what I thought was happening with Maryland. I wasn't, I had not looked into it as depth, but I figured you would have the best answer on that. Thank you for joining us. You've been an incredible wealth of information. I would like to give you a chance to tell us more, tell my listeners where they can find your research on a regular basis, and tell them where to find your book. Or books, I should say.
Our book is with Dr. and Specker on Amazon. It is called ISIS Defectors: Inside Stories of the Terrorist Caliphate. It is available on Kindle as well. All my articles are on my webpage and also my academia and LinkedIn webpage. Basically, if they type my name, Ahmet S. Yayla, they can reach all my articles and studies.
And what is your website?
It is my name, Ahmet S. Yayla, so AhmetSyayla.com. It is about to become alive, so I think in a few days you are going to be able to reach to that website with all my articles and work. But for now, my academia webpage is available with all my articles that can be reached freely.
Thank you for joining us. I'll have to have you back in the future. I'm going to be swallowing some of what you shared with me today. I'm going to have to go back and re-listen. Hopefully, I'll have this show up, posted in a couple of forums that will give people a chance to listen to the wisdom that you shared with us today. Thank you very much.
It was an honor to be with you. I really appreciate your time also. Thank you.
God bless. Bye. Wow. It's the reason I asked him to come join us is, as I said before, I had never. I've read his articles for a few years, and I have to this day not found anyone who writes as specific as Dr. Yayla. It is an amazing bit of information. Just kind of feel like I want to take a breather and listen to and swallow this because there was so much there. His suggestions on what we should be doing, I would hope to God that our country is on the same path. I have a student I have to laugh about because some of the things he talked about, there are some funny names for in the counterterrorism world. So let's talk about the first thing he talked about, and I'm just going to get back up to that summary that Gary wrote, and I have to say thank you again to Gary. And I can't get to it. The first thing he talked about was internet, the internet recruitment and the stuff that's going on. So what I found there is there's a name for it. And I was talking with one of my students who has to write a policy paper, and about what it's called when you go after the people who try to recruit on the internet, and it's called, believe it or not, it's called whack-a-mole when you go after people like that, because what happens is when you close one of these places, another one pops up, just like if you've ever been to Chuck E. Cheese type place where they have those little moles that pop up and you whack them on the head. It's the same thing. One goes down, 3 or 4 pop up. But the value, this is when I try to explain this concept to my student who was interested in learning more, I says, imagine you're out there. What's the most important thing with whack-a-mole? I mean, you're going to hit, if you're taking out a terrorist, and again, we're talking about social media, person who's promoting terrorism in social media, what happens? What is the most important thing that you can get when you whack that mole? And he couldn't figure it out. He says, wait a minute, we're talking social media. Think about it. And he's thinking, and he says, wait a minute, the friends list. Exactly, that's the most important thing. Why? Because, and this is kind of what he was talking about, the friends list tell us who those other people who are listening. Okay, so if he says something and it gets repeated through that friends list, this is where the whack-a-mole concept can be stronger. So now you take that friends list and you whack them all at once. What happens now? And this is the kind of concept, again, it's called whack-a-mole. It sounds horrible for the name, but it's the exact description of it. There are professional articles written on this title because I had to show him because he started laughing when I told him the title. It is a hilarious name, but it is exactly the struggle that we're facing. How do you fight when one pops up just as fast as you close? And that's something I think Yayla was correct. We have to have a way to address this. There probably is. There's probably some genius out there who can actually devise a way for that to happen. Maybe we're still waiting for that genius to do the work. I don't know. But something has to be done, and it has to be done quickly. The other points he talked about, I mean, talking about local recruitment and things. This is just, it's funny. I'm still sitting here, kind of absorbing the impact of what he said. Dr. Yayla, I'm going to tell you, go to his site, read his stuff. I will end up buying his book, among the many other things I'm supposed to be reading. But you need to follow his work. You won't find. If you want to know more about the Islamic State, I recommend few people, very few people. And he is, out of the list of the people that I listen to on this topic, my list is very, very short, let me tell you. When I mean short, I've got less than 5 people that I actually trust for information on this topic. And he is one of them. Not many people are as daring to tell the truth, knowing that his son is still in jail by Erdogan. So people, this is the thing I'm going to ask of you. Pray for Yayla's son. Pray that he gets released. That is the best thing we can do for him at this point. That we can. It's nice to support somebody financially. He's a professor. He's making good money. He's not looking for cash. What he needs is our prayers, and that's what we should offer him. I have a couple stories I do want to get into, and it's going to take me a few seconds. Just again, this was a lot more informative than I expected. I kind of mind blown myself. I knew a lot of the information to a point, but again, it is unusual to have a guest that has this much to share, and I'm just kind of mind blown. Let me tell you what I did find this week, and I did print it out, and I do want to talk about it. I've been following this story of the bombing in Egypt, and I found some information that really, really bothers me. So what you're not hearing, or maybe you are hearing today in the media, is that the guy who is supposedly responsible for the bombing of one of the churches was also arrested in Kuwait for his affiliations with the Islamic State. This, I have a very, very short article, and it comes from, it comes from Egyptian Streets, I believe it was. I'll read the translation in a few minutes. The person's name for the article I do not have, but let me read this. This was kind of surprising. And again, the person who was supposedly had committed the bombing of one of the churches in Egypt. So this article was printed yesterday. It says this: while Egypt was the victim of the bombings of the churches of Majajis in the city of Tanta in the province of Garbia and Marmax in Alexandria, Kuwait entered the line of detection of exit information. Security sources told Akabas that the main suspect in the Alexandria bombing entered the country October 2016 with a work permit for a trade company, and he worked as an accountant there until he was summoned by the State Security Services of Kuwait, based on information they received from their Egyptian counterparts. He was subject to extensive investigation into his relationship with Badash. After confirming his involvement, the decision to deport him was made, and he was to be handed over to the Egyptian authorities. Okay, so this is important to understand. Kuwait handed this person over to the Egyptian authorities because of his involvement in terrorism. What did Egypt do at that point is going to become quite a tale. Again, they have some details on this gentleman which are kind of surprising, but what does it mean when you have somebody you know who's involved with terrorism, hasn't committed something? What do you do? In our country, you have to, in order to be guilty of a crime, you have to have committed something. We don't arrest people for how they think, and there's good reasons for that. I mean, can you arrest somebody before they do something, or do you arrest people after they do something? Part of the problems with living in a free country, you have to trust other people to police themselves, and I'm using that terminology. You have to. Part of living free is taking care of yourself and helping in being responsible for yourself, not causing harm to others. Those people that do are the ones that get locked up. The people who plan those things will end up getting locked up. But again, it's with the concept of living free in a country. You have to get that concept. It's an important thing to understand. Freedom is something we don't consider free. It comes with a price, and part of that is you have to be responsible for yourself. And if people can't follow that, we get into trouble. So let's talk about another news story that was out there this week. This one, the Westminster killer. This is the other truck driver and knife stabber person. Westminster's killer linked to a Luton mosque. This article came from the Times out of the United Kingdom, the Sunday Times. It was written by Andrew Gilligan and Robin Henry. Westminster's killer linked to Luton mosque. This is really brief, so I'll just read the whole article. Okay. The Westminster's terrorist had a key role at a mosque that urges Muslims to take up weapons to gain victory over the Jews and the rest of the enemies of Islam. Khalid Massoud was a public contact person for calltoislam.com, the main website of the hardline Luton Islamic Center Mosque. All right. And it skips a line. Darn it. Okay. He was killed. They killed. People were killed when he drove a car into them in Westminster Bridge during the attack on March 22nd. A fifth victim, Andrea Christia, a Romanist tourist, died on Friday. She was forced off the bridge and died as a result of injuries. Sermons published on calltoislam.com, branded with its logo, call on worshippers to, quote, make ready steeds of war, i.e. weapons, to threaten the enemy of Allah. We ask Allah that He grant us the ability to pursue the proper means for gaining victory over the Jews and over the rest of the enemy of Allah, unquote. So, this is something to think about. This mosque has connections to things, so should it be closed? My answer, of course, is pretty simple. Yes, let's close it. Why should we leave it open? Why should we left? And this will be something that's going on and on. There's a piece from Australia I'm going to play for you. It'll take a little. It's 7 minutes long. I don't normally play something this long. I do want to play this because it talks about what we're really seeing. And one of the persons I put on that I played a piece from him last week. But I do want to play this because, Civilization Jihad is a world problem. This particular piece you'll find it on YouTube. Muslims fight Australia for separate country. It's listed as having been published today on the site it's called Bloody Hell Heaven. But the news piece comes straight from Australia. It's Today, Tonight, Adelaide. So I'm going to play this. So take a listen, and you want to call in and comment, right? I'm not going to play the entire piece, I'll tell you, because it's a little bit long.
But first tonight, the bold plan to build a Muslim state within Australia. The warnings have come from nervous insiders. They're Islamic leaders who are pleading with the government to stop it from happening. And as David Richardson reports, they're receiving death threats just for speaking out.
Sadly, my religion in the current situation is an absolute mess. I come from a lineage of Islamic leadership. When I am worried about what's happening and what I see from my community and religion, trust me that there's something going on.
A stunning admission from the Imam of Peace. The president of the Islamic Association of South Australia, Imam Tawhidi, is worried, and he's not alone.
Society is still worried. And when it reaches a stage where a Muslim imam is worried, that's when something needs to be done.
Tonight, the Muslim clerics and community leaders and their radical calls for Islam to reform itself, and a stark warning of a plan to alter Australia forever, to establish a caliphate here, right under our noses.
The agenda is to create a country within your country. That's what it is. It's to create another country or another government within the Australian government. That's what I believe is their agenda, these extreme Muslims.
Should Sharia law be introduced into Australia?
تطبيق الشريعة مستحيل. The short answer is no, but there's another problem, is that there are many sects within Islam, and each sect considers a different version of the Sharia. So which one would you end up following?
There are about 500,000 Muslims currently living in Australia, 2.2% of the population. But according to some, there are plans to massively change those figures.
There's a movement in Australia to increase the population of the Muslims.
Imam Tawhidi believes it's happening now, a plan to build a nation inside our nation.
So a Muslim community wants to buy an estate, name the streets Islamic names. Literally, they're naming the streets Islamic names of figures that in history massacred and killed people, and there won't be any drinking, There won't be anything un-Islamic. It's a small Islamic country within Sydney.
The Imam believes governments need to stop the construction of mosques and community centres and investigate what's really going on.
I believe that there needs to be a new government body that investigates everything regarding the Muslim religion in this country, starting off with the leaders of the communities.
Going even further than Pauline Hanson's calls for a royal commission into Islam in Australia.
They're all coming from the Wahhabi extremist ideology.
Sunni community leader Jamal Dawood believes Wahhabi money is funding the expansion attempts in Australia.
The finance comes from a wide range of sources. Mainly it comes from the Gulf states, mainly Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Kuwait.
Jamal Dawood wants the burqa and niqab banned from this country.
We are urging authorities to take actions, and we want authorities to take actions, serious actions, not only banning niqab and burqa.
He's no stranger to controversy or attack, often threatened, even assaulted for his moderate views. Right on the streets of our biggest city. But Jamal is no longer a lone voice in the wilderness.
There is no commandment for the burqa or the hijab to be worn.
Moderate Dr. Mustafa Rashid is another calling for change, the moderation of Islam, even allowing Muslims to drink and eat pork.
The Quran itself does not say that alcohol is banned. It actually has a verse that talks about do not pray while you are drunk. So in other words, the problem is with being drunk, not the alcohol itself.
But this is what happens when Dr. Rashid takes his views around the world. He's physically attacked.
هو ده يعني أنا ما تخيلتش إنه يحصل إنه
وأنا حاليا في الاتحاد اللي أنا برأت شرف. There's about 700 scholars around the world who agree with him, and they are trying with their own resources. They're not being funded by anybody, but they're trying with their own resources to publish the fact that a lot of the heritage of Islamic heritage is actually false.
But for their trouble, all three of these men are now subject to ISIS calls for their executions. That's hardly new to them.
I have received so many threats in my life that it's become something normal, to the point that if I don't receive a death threat, I'm surprised. Why didn't I get a death threat today? What happened? They must be busy with something else.
They're busy perhaps trying to ban other things. While trying to shut down the debate, Wahhabi preachers are at the same time railing against everything. From Pokemon Go to Mickey Mouse and Tom and Jerry.
ايش رايك الان بالفقر عند الاطفال؟ يعني بعد توم وجيري، ايش نظرة الاطفال للفئران؟
To Christmas celebrations.
يقيمها هؤلاء الكفر من يهود ونصارى هي أعياد باطلة مخالفة لشريعة الله عز وجل.
And same-sex marriage.
وهذه تأتي في ذروة سنام قبح وشناعة الفواحش.
The Muslim imams, what's in their bank accounts, where it's coming from, who's funding them, the people who are funding them, are they Australian or are they not Australian? Are they non-Australian government agendas?
So today I want to ask you people to think about this. I want you to think about, where are we going? What is considered safe around us? It's a good question. This particular news piece that I put out, it's important. It's an important article, and you can listen to it in fully on YouTube. I'll put the link in in the chat room for everybody who wants to listen to it fully and share it. I think it's important that we think about some of the things that were said. These people are banning things like Tom and Jerry. They're banning things like Mickey Mouse. Oh, they're all concerned about those things, like they're going to hurt them. If they're afraid of Mickey Mouse and Tom and Jerry, I have yet to see them carry a Tommy gun or to go out and shoot people or to take a car and drive it into people. This is what we are seeing from Islamic terrorism. They're using everything they can. Civilization Jihad is slightly different, however. They come into your colleges. That was the first step here in America with the Muslim Brotherhood. They came into your public schools through misinformation that they're putting into textbooks now. And now they're in your society creating Sharia swims and creating things that change who you are. And the last step there in your governments, doing what they can. So people, let me say thank you for sharing and staying on the show.